A girl, being a second-class person who never got the main role, having been reborn and finally getting a place in the foreground, and then she found herself thrown to the bottom by the fault of some hero of the masses. She asks people what they would do in her place, whether they would be reborn as the main character or return to the life of the second plan. Here begins the story of the rebirth of the protagonist who lost everything at the wish of one goddess. The young mistress reads a letter, where it is written that the girl has received information that the daughter of Marquis Garcia is looking for a missing maid. The letter says that the young lady's maid is in the capital in a house. Mistress does not understand if Myruda is there. Mr. asks, "Is Mistress going to send it to the place indicated in the letter?" He says Mistress doesn't need to go there. Mistress turns to a man named Alain and says it's been a week since Ruda went missing. It's been a week. And they haven't had a single hint of what's going on with the girl. Alain understands Mistress's feeling, but it can't be done. Alain escorts the mistress from the room and closes the doors in front of her. The girl falls to her knees and begins to cry. A week ago, the maid Ruda went missing. She was the only interlocutor and friend for the mistress of the lonely pretend future empress. The address has a house number of 128. Mistress says the higher the number, the more dangerous. And if the maid is not rescued as soon as possible, it may be too late. That same night, the mistress comes downstairs from her balcony. Marilyn tries to convince herself that she will succeed. But suddenly, the rope she's tied together starts to tear, and in an instant, the girl falls to the ground. Marilyn's hands are very banged up. The girl sits on her knees, and now she is in a lot of pain. The girl looks around and remembers that only Ruda was always on her side, and only Marilyn could never leave her maid. The girl makes her way further. Now she is running in the forest. But suddenly she notices some guy. He asks the girl if she's the daughter of Marquis Garcia. Marilyn tries not to be recognized, and she says that the young man is just mistaken. The boy replies that if Marilyn is looking for her maid, she can follow him, because he is the guy who wrote her the letter. Marilyn asks why she should believe this guy. At that moment, the guy takes the letter out of his pocket and holds it out to the girl. He says that this letter was sent on the orders of Duchess Jalkin, and this sheet is proof of that. When the protagonist takes the sheet in her hand, she sees that it bears the Duchess's seal. She doesn't understand. Is it really true? The boy says that the lady's maid is at the Duchess's house. He escorts the girl to the carriage and they set off. After a while, they have reached their destination, and the guy escorts the girl out. The protagonist enters the place, and she sees that Cornelia Jalkin is standing in front of her. This girl is in a completely different status with the protagonist. Cornelia is more like an empress, and she is much more worthy for the role of empress. The girl is different from the main character who was chosen only because of the ring. At this point, Cornelia wanted to thank Marilyn for the girl coming to her so quickly. The protagonist does not understand what the mistress is talking about. At that moment, Marilyn turns around and sees her maid Ruda lying behind the bars. Marilyn rushes to the grate and asks what happened. She asks for Ruda to answer her. Ruda is the only person dear to the protagonist. Marilyn turns to her mistress and asks, "What is this, and why did the maid behave this way?" Cornelia asks, "Is Marilyn going to censure her just because of some maid?" Marilyn asks, "Does mistress not know that Ruda serves her?" Cornelia replies that she has already indicated in the letter that it is the girl's maid. Cornelia says that the girl has a bad memory. Smirking at the main character, Cornelia says that it's such a shame that the girl doesn't have any normal friends, even though she is a future empress. But Cornelia says she's only better off for it. The girl orders her servants to grab her guest and put her in a cell. Cornelia says to let Marilyn be with her favorite servant. The protagonist does not realize what is happening, but in an instant she is behind bars. Marilyn rushes to her maid, but Cornelia tells Marilyn not to worry because she hasn't killed her yet. But in her condition, Ruda will die soon. Marilyn does not understand why Mistress Cornelia has done such a cruel thing to her. Marilyn rushes to the bars and starts screaming, but Cornelia just walks away. Marilyn lies next to her maid and does not realize how much time has passed since then, for Marilyn has not had a drop of water since then, and her voice is gone. And her maid Ruda has already stopped breathing. Marilyn is crying and doesn't know what to do. At that moment, Cornelia comes up and says that this is a terrible situation. Marilyn asks for salvation. She begs the girl on her knees. But the mistress replies that even though Marilyn has been starving for so long, the ring will not come off of her. Cornelia says that this girl should hate that ring, not her. Marilyn continues to beg for mistress to let her and Rude go. Cornelia starts getting angry and yelling. She asks, does Marilyn still not realize? Because her handmaiden is already dead. And the protagonist's useful maid was an interesting toy. And Marilyn and the Emperor and that ring. Cornelia hates everyone. The girl through the bars grabs the protagonist by the hair and says that if it weren't for Marilyn, she would have been Empress long ago. And ever since Marilyn showed up, things have been going badly for Cornelia. Because lately, even Emperor Ryer hasn't wanted to see her. The mistress says it's all because of the girl, but she didn't ask for this. Cornelia pulls out her briefcase and says she should be done with this by now. The girl pulls out a huge syringe and says it's a gift from her, and then the girl will be much better. The mistress takes the main character's girl, and Marilyn doesn't understand. Is it really an injection? Cornelia gives the girl this injection and says it's so she won't suffer. But at this point, the protagonist is in a lot of pain. Cornelia tells Marilyn not to worry because soon she will stop feeling pain and she will feel better. At that moment, Marilyn falls to the floor and loses consciousness. Cornelia decides that this is also worth watching. After a moment, the protagonist opens her eyes and sees Emperor Ryer standing next to Cornelia. Marilyn now realizes what it all means. Cornelia apologizes to her mistress. She turns to His Majesty and tells him to take it easy and come back. Marilyn realizes that if she had only known this would happen, she would not have wanted the ring or the Ryer. Ever since she owned the ring, she was never going to be happy. If only she had. One more chance, she would never have worn that ring. The fate given to her from heaven was unnecessary. The girl is unconscious, but after a while she opens her eyes and sees an incredible light. In front of her becomes a beautiful girl with pink hair. Marilyn asks, "Who is this girl?" But the girl replies that she is very happy to see her Marilyn. She says her name is Anthea, and she is the goddess of flowers. Marilyn realizes that this is the same flower goddess Anthea, the creator of this cursed ring, and the culprit behind everything. Marilyn starts to look around. Everything around her and doesn't understand why everything is white. Now, in a sad voice, Marilyn turns to Lady Anthea and asks, "Is she really dead?" The most ordinary appearance a person can meet. Full figure, not good, but also not bad grades girl pathetic character. Resigned to unsightliness in all three aspects. This is the main character, and the way she died was not remarkable either. As the girl was walking through the city, she received a message thanking her for taking time out of her busy schedule to fill their vacancy. Because the company had an interview the other day, and as a result of a rigorous selection process, they regretfully informed the protagonist. They are sorry that they could not meet the girl's expectations. They thank her for her understanding and for choosing their company over others. The company wished the girl all the best in her future endeavors. At that time, the girl did not know if her life was worth it, for she was afraid that she was not a capable person to take her life. So she ran to the supermarket and bought a lot of sweets, and the reason she died was because she was overeating. That's why she had a heavy stomach. Although she was suffering from stomach pain, she turned a blind eye to it and then she fell asleep, and as a result, she had a heart attack while sleeping. The girl has no words, because it's the most pathetic death, and such a pathetic God-given gift. When she did not live, the life of the main character was reborn as the heroine of her favorite novel, which is called The Ring of the Ruler. This novel is about how the flower goddess Anthea and the fire god Azar married and created the world. The marriage of the flower goddess and the fire god, so different in nature, was blessed, but there was only one flaw. For the descendants whose veins flowed with Azar's blood could not control their anger and became despots who established tyranny for centuries. Grief-stricken Anthea created the ring. It's designed to find a mate for the emperor. When the true owner puts the ring on, Anthea's diamond changes from black to bronze, and no matter how hard a man tries the ring, the emperors who have found their intended mate become humble and can control their anger, and then peace and tranquility come to the empire. That's how it turns out that the owner of the ring, Antaeus, calmed down early with the help of a heavenly connection, and the girl, becoming his wife, lives a happy life. That's the plot of this book, and Marilyn Garcia is the protagonist of the novel. After all, she, becoming the wife of 32-year-old Emperor Ryer tamed a rare tyrant, and the girl became everyone's favorite empress. And the title of the novel Ring Ruler means that the tyrants of glory in the face of the owner of the ring and live only for the sake of these girls. The heroine of the novel, the protagonist, had to be reborn, but in fact, Rhea was indifferent to her. And the surrounding people also treated her coldly, and in prison suddenly appeared the heroine of the second plan and took the emperor to herself. As a result, the girl ended up in prison and died. She does not understand what a meaningless life, but it was her life, because she is Sinahara Yui, as well as Marilyn Garcia. When the heroine saw the goddess Anthea in front of her, the girl realized that she was definitely dead. At that moment, the goddess suggests the girl to look in the mirror. When Marilyn hears about Anthea suggesting her to look in the mirror, it means that she ignored the protagonist's question. Marilyn doesn't understand how to make sense of it. But suddenly, a huge, tall mirror appears in front of her, in which she sees blood and destruction, as well as Emperor Ryer, who is suffering. Marilyn doesn't understand why the world she sees is like hell. Ryer is there fighting using fire. Around him already, everything is on fire, and his mouth starts to bleed. The protagonist turns to the girl and asks what it is. Was it Anthea who created the illusion? But the girl tells her that it's not, and it's just the world after Marilyn died. The protagonist says it can't be. It can't be. It can't be that it's Ryer. Because it's a lie, and Ryer at that moment was definitely just mercilessly watching Marilyn die. Because Ryer is such an indifferent man and he can't be like that mirror. The heroine doesn't even want to remember what she felt at the time of her death, but Anthea asks that the girl go back in time and fix this sad future. Marilyn doesn't understand. Is this woman really telling her to go back in time now? But Anthea continues to persuade the girl. She asks, does Marilyn not want to return things to the way they should be? But Marilyn doesn't understand what Anthea's talking about. Because if she really is the flower goddess Anthea, then she must have seen everything that's happened up to this point. Marilyn wonders if she wants things to go back to the way they were, but she really doesn't. Marilyn is dead after everything that happened. And does she have to go back? But there's no way the protagonist would agree to that. She asks, is Anthea pretending to feel sorry for the protagonist? I mean, she's just worried about her descendants. That's why she says that. The goddess of flowers and peace doesn't think, not about anyone but her descendants. Marilyn didn't think that this girl is a goddess only to those she herself loves. Anthea says she's not doing this at all because of her descendants, but the protagonist doesn't even want to listen to this girl. Marilyn starts getting angry and yelling. She says that if the goddess is interested, she doesn't want to mess with their offspring anymore. Anthea replies that the girl has no choice. After all, it is the wrong end from death. It is just a mistake. The protagonist falls to the floor and tells Anthea to close, for she will remain here for the rest of her spirit days, without any rebirths, for she is fine as she is, after all the blood ties and territorial ties she is fed up with. Anthea says that the protagonist, even after what she's seen, what the world has pretended to be. After her death, there is still no desire to return. But Marilyn says that this is the result of the actions of the goddess's favorite descendants. The goddess apologizes to the girl from the bottom of her heart, but she has to put things back the way they were. The goddess begins to rebirth the girl again. Marilyn tries to stop her. She doesn't understand, if it's true. And Anthea wants her back, which is on Earth. The goddess lifts the girl into space and Marilyn begins to scream. She asks, what is the goddess doing? She doesn't understand. Can Anthea really call herself a goddess of peace after all this? She's the goddess of love for her own bloodline. Marilyn becomes angry that the goddess is bringing her back to that horrible life. The protagonist talks about how the goddess really is the worst in the whole world. When the protagonist opens her eyes, she sees a maid standing in front of her and talks about the girl being called by her father. Marilyn sees that Ruta is standing in front of her because she's alive and well now. She is not the same Ruta who died so painfully in prison. Ruta asks Mistress what happened, but Marilyn realizes that she has indeed come back to life. She asks that Ruta give her a clue as to how old she is. But Ruta doesn't understand what's going on, because Mistress and her birthday last week when she turned 16. Marilyn realizes that 16 is the year she put the ring on, and this goddess has decided to make her start from the beginning. The girl was 16 years old when she first met Ryer. Ryer was 23 years old at the time. Marilyn looked quite childish, and so the guy had an affair with Cornelia, who had a much better body. Marilyn turns to the maid and talks about all those 3 years she's been thinking things over and deciding that Ryer is bad after all. Ruta doesn't realize if Mistress is okay. After some time, Marilyn walks into her father's study and sees her mother standing there. She asks if her parents called for her. Her mother tells Marilyn to come quickly. The protagonist sees her father and mother smiling at her. Marilyn remembers how long ago it was when she saw her parents smiling. After all, in her last rebirth, when they came to own the ring and Ryer treated her coldly. Her mother had yelled at her and told her that at such times she should make more effort, and Marilyn should keep herself at her best. Her mother had been very strict with the protagonist then, and her father, from the way. The way Ryer treated her was always in a bad mood, always sighing. Parents started avoiding seeing their daughter, unless there were appropriate occasions. Marilyn thought that it was probably because their daughter was disliked. Also because Marilyn had become the owner of the ring, relations between Ryer and her father, the excellent minister, had deteriorated. At home and in the castle and in society, Marilyn was all alone. The only person who was always by her side and protected her was the maid Ruta. And if Marilyn thinks about it, she had a really miserable life. Her father asks if Marilyn remembers his good friend Duke Bolton from the Katlia Empire. Marilyn remembered him, of course. After all, he's been their close friend since her father was at the Middle-earth Academy. In this novel, the place where Marilyn lives is called the Betrayal Empire. There's also the Second Empire, which is called the Katlia. And there are 9 kingdoms, and on top of that, there are vast lands where the beggar nations live. One of the 9 kingdoms is Middle-earth, and it's a neutral state that sits between Betrayal and Katlia. This country was famous for its level of education and fine academies that attracted many students from all over the world. Father talks about the Duke of Bolton's children going to attend the Academy of Middle-earth. He asks if Marilyn will go to that place as well. Marilyn remembers that the first time Father offered it to her too, and last time she refused and died in vain. This time, in order to avoid a bad outcome, the protagonist will go to study. The daughter rushes to her father and says that this academy is very hard to get into. Her father is the best. In fact, if Marilyn remembers correctly, the Duke of Bolton is the headmaster or headmistress, is either the principal or the headmaster of this academy, and it's really important for her to have connections in life. Marilyn realizes that now nothing will be as Anthea wants it to be, and so she can say goodbye to Ryer. But in that moment, Marilyn forgot something important. For if she's going to be honest, Marilyn is Garcia. A good-for-nothing and useless girl, an irresistible spoiled girl who was born into a wealthy marquis family with nothing to worry about at all. In an instant, she was chosen to own the ring and become the next empress. And if she looks from the outside, it's not clear why she should complain. But the truth is Marilyn. She's just a girl who's been lucky with her looks and her family. And maybe that's why there hasn't been a single kind soul in society. Her father says that Marilyn is the only one hiding some of her talent from them so far, and instead of the academy, she will enroll in a regular business management program. These words pierce her straight to the heart. After all, if she was a cheater character from another novel who can use explosive magic, then she'd be fine. Her father approaches the girl and tries to reassure her, because even the most average students can find their talent later. In the girl's memory, she died at the age of 19 without ever discovering any talent. Her father tells her that the entrance to the academy won't start until next month, and so they need to finish with the ring-fitting ceremony first. Marilyn gets furious and tries to stop her father. The protagonist says that she doesn't want to rush the ring-fitting and she will return to the academy during the long vacation. Her father says it's too complicated, and that her going to the academy was also meant to marry her to the Duke of Bolton's son. They can't announce the engagement before the daughter goes through the ceremony. The ring-fitting ceremony. It's a ceremony to find the wearer. And just like Cinderella's slipper, the one who fits the ring perfectly becomes the empress. The daughters of aristocrats don't even get engaged until they're 16. Everyone dreams that the ring will choose them, and they'll become part of the royal palace. Therefore, there is an unspoken understanding among the elite that for a daughter to be engaged, she must first complete the ring-fitting ceremony. For an aristocrat of the Betrayal Empire, this is already something of an obligation. girls who so believe that they are the chosen ones for the ring. When they reach the age of 16, they go to the ceremony as soon as possible and return ashamed. So Marilyn thought her father would allow the ceremony to be postponed. Father says Marilyn must have been surprised at the sudden engagement. Mom says it's fine, and they'll do the ceremony mystery, so Marilyn can take it easy. But the main character is angry that her parents never understood her. She doesn't get it. She doesn't understand if she's going to die again. After a few days, Marilyn sits on a chair and thinks about how awful it is, because the days of admission and the days of the fitting ceremony are approaching. While the maid Ruta asks her mistress, "What's wrong?" Because Marilyn has been stomping her foot nervously all this time. Marilyn turns to the maid, asking what will happen if she owns the ring. The maid starts laughing and asks, "Is the mistress joking? There are even rumors that there is no owner of the ring. 6 years have passed and she is still gone. And if someone becomes empress, everyone will know about it. And the heir must appear no later than 10 years after His Majesty's majority. It usually takes 3 years to find the empress. This is the first time that the search has only taken time, although it would be better to find the owner sooner to appease the emperor. According to the myth of the emergence of the Empire of Betrayal, this country was founded on the descendants of the gods of flowers and peace of Antiochus, and the gods of fire and destruction of Azar. Of course, although they were descendants of the goddess of peace, but because of their father's strong genes from generation to generation, the emperors show the power of fire. They are tyrants who seek only destruction. And unable to turn a blind eye to this, Anthea created the ring. The ring became the only way to choose a celestial mate for the emperor. And a tyrant who has found a mate becomes humble, and then there is peace in the empire. So the owner was to appear within 3 years of the emperor's majority. This is a legend that is known to every citizen of the empire, and until then, it has matched reality, except for the current emperor Ryer, the worst tyrant in the history of the empire and the god of war. These are the other names of Ryer. Marilyn realizes that, as expected, he has been tyrant for the 6th year, and no wonder the people are so eagerly awaiting the appearance of the ring's owner. At this point, the maid thinks that the lady would be a great ring bearer, and the emperor, as soon as he sees the protagonist, will fall madly in love with her. Marilyn says that even if Ruta is joking, she should stop, because she's saying strange things. Ruta says she's a mistress to her. That's the most important person. The protagonist thinks that it's certainly nice, but she doesn't want Ruta to think about it. But still, Marilyn realizes she can't think about it forever, and she must leave tomorrow's business to her tomorrow. On the day of the ring-fitting ceremony, Marilyn begins to scream and doesn't understand why the ring won't come off. The protagonist realizes that it happened. It happened again. Marilyn has made the same mistake she made in her first life, and everything will happen again like it did then. The girl is worshipped and called the goddess Anthea. They call her Majesty the Empress. Marilyn starts to get angry and asks why it's not coming off. She asks for Ruta to bring her some soapy water. The protagonist tries to calm down. Marilyn is surprised to be called Her Majesty the Empress. She doesn't understand which empress they are talking about. At that moment, the girl's father and mother arrive, and the maid Ruta brings soapy water. No one understands what has happened at all. Marilyn thinks about the fact that she understands it actually better than anyone, because this ring, which has not come off even after all the experiences in her past life, will never come off. Anthea's ring will not come off until the ring's owner gives birth to an heir and reaches adulthood. Then the ring will fall off the empress's finger, and will return to its original black color and start looking for the next chosen one. Marilyn can't believe that in the past, she thought this was romantic. Marilyn begins to cry and she falls to her knees. She says that the ring should not have fit her. At this point, the girl ducks in front of her and says that since Marilyn owns the ring, she must meet His Majesty the Emperor as soon as possible. Marilyn realizes that this is an incredible nightmare, and there is no way for her to avoid meeting Ryer again. After some time, Marilyn desperately sits at the table, and the maid is happy to see the Marquis and Madame Garcia are overjoyed. But Marilyn realizes that her father seemed disappointed that there had been a breakdown in her engagement to the Duke of Bolton's son. The maid turns to her mistress and asks, was the protagonist so reluctant to become the ring's owner? Marilyn tells her that Antiochus's ring is actually a very cruel thing. It's more of a chain than a granted heavenly bond. There's no way this ring will ever come off unless the protagonist dies or cuts off a finger. Unlike her past now, Marilyn doesn't want the fact that she owns the ring to be publicized, especially because of Cornelius, though it will probably spread on its own anyway. Marilyn realizes that there's no way she could have avoided the ceremony and become the ring's owner, but this time she's not going to let anything go to Cornelius' plans. At the request of the protagonist, the information that she became the owner of the ring will not be made public, and the meeting with the Emperor will also be held secret. Imperial Light, and a meeting with His Imperial Majesty. The ring's owner has indeed been found. The Emperor says he hasn't seen this rose-colored ring in a long time. The perfect face of a guy with amber-colored eyes, but he's like a beast, and the only brunette in the entire Ryer Empire. Black is reserved for the royal family, and the fact that the diamond in Antius's ring is black is because of the hair color that's passed down in the imperial family. This guy is just a man sitting here, scaring Aura like a black panther. This is a creature that Marilyn would never want to make an enemy. And it's Ryer's boyfriend. Marilyn sees that Ryer didn't recognize the ring or her as the ring's owner last time either. For the guy, the Empress is nothing more than a nuisance. Ryer said he found the ring's owner. They don't want to hide it. Marilyn goes to His Majesty and says that she doesn't want to be an empress, and for her the ring is just like a chain. The protagonist sees the look in the guy's eyes. She tries not to remember the way he looked at her when she was dying. Ryer talks about how Antius's ring is almost the Bertel Empire itself, and no matter how hard he tries, he can't cover up its disappearance. But Ryer says he can cover up its owner's disappearance, and if Marilyn is so eager to enter the academy, the Chancellor will magically make the ring invisible. Marilyn starts to get incredibly excited, but the prince says that hiding the ring for too long won't work. So for 2 years they will spread rumors that the owner of the ring is still underage and studying at the academy. Marilyn asks, does she really just have to hide for 2 years for that rumor to work? Ryer says that's exactly right. From this point on, the girl's guardian is not Marquis Garcia, but him. Marilyn doesn't understand. She can't believe that her guardian is now Ryer. The guy says that with a ring on her finger, the girl must go to a foreign academy. Marilyn gets angry and doesn't understand. Does this guy think she's not a subject? But in fact, this guy specifically hates that ring. Sometime after the audience, Marilyn is sitting with her maid again. The maid turns to her mistress and talks about Marilyn owning the ring, which is causing a stir throughout the Empire and her. I can't believe it. Somewhat excited, Father tells the protagonist he's proud of her. Marilyn doesn't understand if it's really her parents. Her mother met her wiping tears from her face. The next day, rumors of the ring's owner were spreading across the empire, with commoners and nobles alike sharing a variety of opinions, even within the Garcia court. Only her parents and butler knew of the ring's ownership and Marilyn, and her maid Ruda. Maid Ruda can't wait to chat with everyone. The maid asks the protagonist if it's true that His Majesty is a creepy man. In fact, when Marilyn first met the guy, though Ryer was angry and he asked, was this girl considered the most beautiful girl in the Empire? It was as if the protagonist, happy about being chosen by the ring, was poured ice water, and this time Marilyn was really very shocked by Ryer's words. For as it seemed that the main character was just smiling, then like a silly girl. Indeed, if some people open their mouths, then they say things completely inappropriate for their face. After all, even then, Ryer had said that if Marilyn closed her mouth, she seemed to look pretty good. Marilyn was angry because of what Ryer had said about her looks back then. After all, no matter how you look at it, she's a peerless beauty. But the protagonist is lost in her own thoughts and is approached by a maid. Marilyn says she doesn't remember much about the Emperor, but she didn't have a very good impression of him. Marilyn asks that from now on, Ruda be careful too, because even she can't protect her. After all, Marilyn failed to save Ruda's maid for the first time, and the protagonist doesn't want either of them to go through that again. So this time, she will definitely protect her maid. After some time, the protagonist is having tea, and the maid is minding her own business. Ruda talks about the fact that it's already 2 days later. They are leaving in the middle, and that's sad. Marilyn says that frankly she's glad her debut into society has been delayed 2 years. Noble daughters usually make their debut into society at 16. Last time Marilyn attended many balls instead of the Emperor, she didn't get a warm welcome. And besides, if she goes out now, That woman Cornelia Jalkin will rule like a queen. Marilyn hates balls and social circles, and she has no friends. The maid Ruta embraces her mistress and tells her that she will always be at her side. Marilyn thanks her maid. After a while, the day of departure has come. At this moment, Marilyn and Alain are standing outside. A carriage appears in front of the protagonist, and Marilyn sees that Chancellor Carter is there. The protagonist kept waiting, and he didn't come. Marilyn was already thinking he wasn't coming at all. Carter says he and his mistress. They haven't seen each other in a long time, and it's His Majesty's order, so Carter will treat her with respect. The boy says he will escort mistress to the academy. Frederick Carter is the Chancellor of the Empire. In his past life, this guy is one of those who treated the girl badly, and that's why Marilyn just hates him. But now she says that she is pleased to meet the guy. The main character gets into the carriage, and she is upset because she has to go all the way to the academy with this guy. It's an unbelievable nightmare for the girl. In the carriage, Carter helps the girl hide the ring. Only no matter how talented a magician Carter is, he needs to renew his illusion spells every 6 months. Marilyn is surprised at Carter calling himself talented now. Carter says that as long as there are no mages stronger than him, or at least on par with him, no one will recognize the presence of the ring. Marilyn asks about the professors at the academy, but Carter has heard that they are all below the 4th rank, and only the headmaster has a 5th rank, but the others are all below 4th rank, and only mages of rank 5 and above can detect his magic. Marilyn asks, "Does this mean that magic doesn't work on a principal who is 5th rank?" Carter replies that he will tell Principal Carlos about the ring right away. Albert Carlos is known as an eminent sage and lover of sensual love stories. Marilyn realizes that it does sound like he would be interested in the story of the ring. Marilyn realizes everything the guy told him, and she says, "Chancellor Carter," to call her Marilyn. The girl wonders if His Majesty ordered anything. The Chancellor replies that the protagonist should not be shy then either and just call him Friedrich. But to be honest, the guy tells her that there is one point. The Chancellor holds out earrings to the girl, saying for Miss Marilyn to wear them. Marilyn doesn't understand what the big deal is, but Friedrich tells that these are earrings that are made by order of His Majesty. They are endowed with the magic of counting and treating, so Marilyn wear. The protagonist picks up these earrings and sees that they are black, just like Ryer. And it's shield and cure. Marilyn asks the Chancellor, "Is she in danger?" Friedrich replies that as Marilyn may already be aware of the rumors about the ruler, the rings have spread throughout the empire. And the girl's name has been mentioned on a list of possible candidates for the chosen one. And it seems that His Majesty has decided to just play it safe. Marilyn is surprised to see that even though Ryer is her guardian, his attitude towards the protagonist is nothing like it used to be. For one thing, she is accompanied by the Chancellor of the Empire himself, which would not have been mental in her first life. Marilyn doesn't understand why the Emperor is so suddenly concerned about her, but Marilyn says that His Majesty is indeed a wonderful guardian. She asks that the Chancellor convey her gratitude to the Emperor. When the protagonist arrives, the Chancellor bids the girl farewell and wishes her a fun student life at the academy. She thanks Friedrich and says that they will see each other in 6 months. Marilyn walks on and realizes that she has finally arrived because this academy is Oxafobard. This academy is known for its boarding school, where no one is allowed to enter except those affiliated with the academy. And even if one is the son of an aristocrat, there's no question of bringing anything with them. The children are angry because they can't carry these suitcases. They can't take maids or guards with them. They have to live on their own. Marilyn is happy and says that if she remembers the life of Shinohara Yui, who has repeatedly arrived without a house and without money, she will be easy with this luggage. After a few dozen minutes, Marilyn realizes that she can't handle this huge luggage. She doesn't realize what this huge school is all about. She doesn't know where the dormitory is here, as if walking in circles. After walking like this, her body, as expected, is very tired. At that moment, the protagonist is patted on the shoulder. She turns around and a girl is standing behind her. She asks if Marilyn is lost. After all, she's been keeping an eye on the protagonist all this time. The girl asks if Marilyn is looking for the dormitory. The protagonist is surprised at the nice girl standing in front of her. The girl grabs the main character's suitcase and Marilyn asks if the girl has been studying here for years. But she replies that it's her first time here too, and her name is Nella Bolton. Nella asks if by chance the girl's name is Marilyn Garcia. The protagonist is incredibly surprised because that is indeed her name. Nella asks if Marilyn knows that she and Marilyn are neighbors, because her father has decided that if they are to be a family in the future, it is better that they live together. The protagonist remembers that she was supposed to marry the Duke of Bolton. Nella is the daughter of the Duke of Bolton. In fact, even before that, her father had said that the daughter's entry into the academy was also intended to marry her off to the Duke of Bolton's son. Marilyn apologizes for only now noticing this. She asks, "Is the girl really the Duke of Bolton's daughter?" Nella is happy that Marilyn finally noticed. And even so, the girl is very cute. Nella says that she will be sorry if they don't become one family with a nice girl like Marilyn. Nella is going to walk the main character in and shows her that the sorority house is the other way around, and she's going to give the main character a tour. They leave and Marilyn starts running after the girl. Nella reveals that, to be honest, the protagonist's engagement partner is her twin brother. Nella reveals that her brother is studying fencing and magic, so she doesn't think they will be seeing her brother much. In this novel, Nella is on the same line of business management as Marilyn, and it seems that magic has passed all her talents to her brother. Suddenly, Nella notices very pretty earrings on the main character's ears. Marilyn says it must be from the Guardian. Nella says that the Guardian must be very fond of the girl, but Marilyn says that it's nothing like that. They're in a strictly business relationship. Nella's got it all wrong. But Nella replies that after the admission ceremony, she will ask the girl everything to death about the story. When the students went through the ceremony, they were told that the admission ceremony was over and the students could go to their offices. When the students started to leave, Marilyn can't find her friend Marilyn. At that moment, the girl's name is called and it's her friend Nella. She shows her twin brother and says it's her brother, Halen Bolton. The guy has blonde hair and dark eyes. In class, the main character was discussed about being Garcia's daughter from Betrayal. The girl suddenly shouted out in the meeting, "Although Marilyn looks kind of decent, but people think the girl hit her head." At this time, Nella starts laughing with the main character. Marilyn asks if Nella can stop laughing because she's going to die of shame. But Nella says that what Marilyn did was ridiculous, because a few dozen minutes ago, when Nella showed her brother to her friend, Marilyn was amazed at how handsome the guy was. This is the highest form of beauty, and she couldn't believe that there were such beautiful young men besides Emperor Ryer. Marilyn started beating her head and screaming for Nella to introduce them. At that moment, Marilyn herself didn't notice that she was screaming so loudly, that the scream echoed through the hall. And that's why everyone's looking at her now. Nella keeps laughing and she apologizes. "You don't make fun of your friend." Nella just saw that look on her brother's face for the first time. Marilyn says even with that look on his face, the guy is incredibly cool. Nella asks if Marilyn has any regrets about their wedding, but the upset protagonist says that the wedding was not her fault. After all, there was no other way out. Although the ring is not seen, but her hand movements are visible. Nella says that after she saw the girl's recent performance, she already realized that it was not of her will. Marilyn asks that Nella forget about it already. At lunch, Nella says that if Marilyn doesn't eat, she'll feel bad. As expected of a first-class academy, the classes at this academy were terribly difficult. The teachers and students of this academy talk science, and Marilyn is the only one who floats from it. Marilyn asks why Nella, on the contrary, is so energetic now. The girl answers that because we from childhood together with her brother received education, and her brother is genius enough to be called a prodigy of the century. Suddenly, the protagonist and her friend are approached by Mr. Bolton. He says his name is Halen. When the protagonist sees the guy, she thinks his smile is unfairly seductive, because Halen really is a genius, or rather a genius thief of her heart. Nella gets angry and asks why her brother is here. Isn't he busy? Halen replies that he just wanted to see Marilyn one more time. Nella starts yelling and telling Halen to stay out of the way because she was talking to a girl. Halen doesn't understand why he's interfering at all, and he says that Nella is too noisy and asks his sister to be quieter. Marilyn is surprised at the fact that even when Beauty and Belle are fighting, it's still like pictured. Nella grabs her brother's hand and tells him that Halen's class isn't over yet and he needs to go back. But Halen doesn't know whether to tell her sister about it, because even in such a free atmosphere of the academy, and Nella must not forget her dignity, because she is the daughter of a duke, and this is not the Katlia Empire, where Nella could walk freely wherever she wanted. The boy turns to the protagonist and says that Nella can be clingy, and so he asks her to forgive him for that. He will look forward to the day when they see each other at the meeting this week. When the guy leaves, Nella says that she is glad that the main character's wedding to her brother is off. After all, Halen has a very bad temper. Marilyn asks if she and Mr. Halen aren't getting along well since they're twins. Nella says it's just a stereotype, that Geminis are necessarily good friends and probably what you would call a bad relationship. Marilyn has always been an only child, so she doesn't understand. Gemini must have its own difficulties in being one. After a while, Marilyn was sitting at the table next to the twins, and Nella was asking Marilyn if she loved her more than Halen. But her brother told Nella to stop because Marilyn already puts up with so much because of them. Thanks to this duo of charming twins, the life of the protagonist in the academy was not boring at all, and every time they encounter Nella and Halen childishly fight. Marilyn asked that the boy and girl not fight over her. Of course they're cute, but they should rest. Nella asks if Marilyn got permission to go on vacation this month. Nella asks if Marilyn remembers that they said they'd spend the first vacation together. Since it's an academy boarding school, the rules are very strict in leaving the grounds. Unless there's a specific reason, it's forbidden. But if a person has their parents sign a request to leave, only once a month can go out. And so yesterday, Marilyn wrote a letter to her father. Her father still hasn't answered her letter. Nella has heard that they need to give the signed application to the dorm manager as early as this week. Nella says that it would be good if the girl's father had time. In this world, the devices that Manu uses to send letters are used to transmit letters, to send letters. The protagonist's father should have no particular reason not to let her go out on vacation. And if everything is normal, then in the near future, Marilyn should receive an answer. And the girl is definitely sure that her father will allow her. After a while, the girl received a letter. The father asks, "Is everything good in the academy at the daughter?" The father is very worried about her and therefore will not be able to sign the permission to leave the academy for vacations. Since Marilyn is now the owner of the ring, all decisions concerning her are now His Majesty's, and if she is not comfortable going to His Majesty directly, Marilyn can go to Chancellor Cartwright. Marilyn becomes angry because the answer is late and she has to get permission from Misha. If the protagonist is not mistaken, magic is used to verify the statements, which means she cannot forge her father's signature. In his past life, Ryer was not interested in the protagonist and treated her coldly. Marilyn is sure that Ryer will refuse, and even if she writes him a letter of request. The girl thought she would try to avoid contact with him, but to live bound by the ring or Ryer. It's just pathetic, and she has nothing to do. Marilyn decides that she will act. At this time, a servant came to Cornelia and said the report was over. Cornelia took the paper and said the man was free to go. But after a moment, Cornelia shrinks the sheet. She will never accept that the girl is the owner of the ring, because she knows it is Marilyn Garcia. Nella approaches the protagonist and asks what's wrong. Has the answer from her father still not come? Marilyn tells her that she was told by her father that leaving the academy was very dangerous, so he didn't sign the paper. Nella starts yelling and saying that it can't be done that way, and she offers to convince the girl's father. Nella tries to convince her friend because she doesn't really like that. But if Halen is with them, all is not lost. Halen is called the genius of the Katlia Empire for a reason. The heroine asks what if Halen removes the anti-counterfeiting spell from her spell, but Nella says he can't. Not even Halen, not even her father can break the spell. And after all, their headmaster is called a great sage, and few people can break his magic. Marilyn asks, "Is it really so even if you ask the girl's father, the chairman of the academy, and—" Nella apologizes. But suddenly, Nella starts screaming and saying that they will not help the cause with tears, and she suggests that the protagonist try to persuade her father. At night, the girl tries to write a sheet to the Duke, asking him to let her out of the academy. She does not understand how she can even write a letter to His Majesty, because since Marilyn can't rely on the Duke of Bolton to help her, or the removal of the spell, she has no choice but to write to Ryer. Marilyn can't tell Nell anything about the ring, and so she has to handle it herself. But Marilyn has no idea how to write a letter to this highness. Marilyn wants to write a letter asking if the Emperor could sign her permission to go out, and she would be very grateful if Ryer would consider it. But Marilyn decides that would be okay, and she finally does the letter. Nella decides she needs to finish it, while Nella sleeps. The main character thinks about the fact that Ruta is probably sad all the time too, and she decides to write a maid's letter on the letter. In her letter, Marilyn asks how the girl is doing. The protagonist writes that she is doing well and has recently made her first friends. Her friends are the son of Duke Bolton, with whom the protagonist was engaged, and his sister. They are twins and very beautiful. If it weren't for Antius's ring, Marilyn would have married this nice guy, and the girl is very hurt because of it. Marilyn writes to tell Ruta to just listen to His Majesty become her guardian. And because of this, Marilyn won't be able to leave the academy even once a month. The heroine doesn't understand why this particular guy. Marilyn realizes that this probably sounds like whining already, and she apologizes to the girl. Marilyn decides that tomorrow she has to get up earlier than her friend and send a letter. So now Marilyn goes to bed. It turns out that she has only a chance to wait for Ryer's reply. The next day, the main character already receives a reply from the Emperor, and Ryer writes that he is sorry that Marilyn hates the existence of the ring so much, but still, she became its owner and could not marry Bolton's son. Ryer will sign the girl's statement so she can no longer send him the letters she is so reluctant to write. Marilyn doesn't realize what she has done because she did send a letter to the Emperor that she was going to send to the maids. Marilyn thinks that everything is over, and Ryer is probably out of his mind with anger and will kill the girl and the next meeting. At that moment, Nella suddenly appears behind the protagonist's back and asks if the girl is okay and if she got an answer from her father. Marilyn says that she has gotten permission. Nella is happy that they are going to have fun together with the protagonist. Marilyn is surprised that Nella is so excited. Marilyn finally gets permission, which means she's not in trouble. It's her long-awaited weekend with her very first friends. Marilyn realizes that this should be fun. After a while, the girls change clothes and makeup. Nella looks at herself in the mirror and says it turned out nice. Nella is surprised that Marilyn has such a good sense of style. Nella thought the girl didn't have much ability. Marilyn thanks the girl and says that Nella is very nice too. Nella tells her that all the time she was leaving it to the maids, and so Marilyn just saved her. The protagonist doesn't understand. Will the skills from the old world really help in this place? At this point, the girls are already leaving the room, and Nella talks about how Halen is already waiting for them outside. They should go soon. Marilyn apologizes and asks the guy about what. Are they a little late? But Halen says it's no big deal, and he knows it takes the girls a long time. Halen says that Marilyn is really nice today. The main character is surprised to see that Halen is really very kind, and she looks like and really fell in love with him. Nella sees that something about her brother has changed. She says that Halen is even on fire today. Kosti replies that he is always like that. Marilyn asks her brother and sister to stop arguing because they have to go. Nella calls her friend and asks how Marilyn feels about it. Isn't it cute? But at this point, Nella pulls out a brooch, and Marilyn says it's very cute and would suit a girl. But at that moment, Nella says it's a brooch for the main character, because Nella, as soon as she saw it, thought Marilyn would like it. The protagonist looks in the mirror, and Nella says that it suits the girl very well. Marilyn sees that the longer she looks at it, the more she likes it and wants to buy it. Marilyn asks, she wonders what the price of this topaz is. The saleswoman replies that it is worth it. Marilyn is surprised that gold alone is already worth 10,000 yen, which means this hairpin is worth 1,000,000 yen. No matter how rich her family is, but 1,000,000 for a hair clip. It's too much for the main character. Marilyn takes off this brooch, and Nella asks. Marilyn won't buy it, but the protagonist suggests they look at other stores. When they went to look at the other hairpins, they were offered 300 gold, 500 gold, and even 1,000. Marilyn is surprised at such high prices. She says it can't be. Marilyn doesn't understand. Is it really like this everywhere? Marilyn asks what's with the high prices. The main character and her friends walk out of this store. Marilyn realizes that she didn't have to buy things herself, and so she didn't know anything about the prices here. Marilyn thought that 50 gold would be enough for her for an entire semester. Nella suggests they go somewhere else this time. Marilyn apologizes and says that she is a little tired and it would be time for them to eat soon. Nella asks if they can come back then, but honestly, Marilyn is tired from shopping all day from early morning. And Halen and Nella are looking pretty chipper, despite the fact that they argue all the time. After all, unlike the protagonist, these two are in a good mood. Suddenly, the protagonist at this moment, hands grabbed by the neck, two guys tell Marilyn not to move. The protagonist does not understand what is happening. Marilyn doesn't realize what these black men are. She starts to call out to her friends when Halen and Nella. This is seen, they become very frightened. Suddenly, one of the guys who caught the main character pulls out a knife and presents it to the girl's neck. He tells Nella and Halen not to move. Marilyn asks them to stop doing that because she doesn't even have any money. At that moment, he scrapes the girl's knife slightly, making a scratch. He tells Marilyn to shut her mouth. The protagonist doesn't realize what she's done. But at that moment, suddenly, Nella starts yelling for Marilyn to use her earrings. And Marilyn starts yelling the word shield. At that moment, a huge shield appears around the girl, and the two guys fly off to the sides. Nella and Halen are happy about what happened. But at that moment, Marilyn falls unconscious to the ground. After some time, Marilyn opens her eyes, and Nella is sitting next to her. The girl is happy that Marilyn has finally regained consciousness. Marilyn asks where they are. Nella tells her that they are at the school nurse's office. Nella asks that Marilyn calm down because the girl's shield jabbed those men and they immediately ran away. Nella doesn't understand who those guys were and why they attacked her. If it wasn't for the earrings His Majesty gave her, she could have been killed at that moment. Nella says everything's fine now and the school will never let outsiders in. And Nella will always be there for the girl. Marilyn says that Nella tipped her off about the earrings when she was captured. She asked how Nella knew the earrings gave her a shield. After all, the main character didn't tell her about it. Nella apologizes and tells Marilyn not to resent her for not telling her sooner. In fact, Nella was also trained in swordsmanship and magic with her brother since childhood, so she knew that these earrings contain mana. Marilyn asks why then is Nella in the Department of Management. If she can also learn fencing and magic, she could have enrolled with her brother. Nella says it's because Halen is the heir of the Bolton family, and the girl's abilities are much weaker than her brother's. And if it becomes clear that Nella also has abilities, then the inheritance becomes very complicated, because the heirs must have absolute power. The protagonist recalls that there was indeed a time when she thought there was some clear hierarchical division between brother and sister. But Marilyn thought it was simply because Halen is just a strict older brother. Marilyn is surprised that it means a friend with no chance just got left off the heir list. Nella says that's it because Halen is a genius and she can never top him. Nella says that the abilities in her brother are really excellent anyway. At this point, the girl holds out a cookie and suggests they put this conversation off for later and have a snack. Nella also thinks that Marilyn should talk to her guardian about the situation. If the shield hadn't worked then, it would have been very dangerous. Marilyn thinks that no one really needs to know that she owns the ring, because she's very worried that she's facing such danger. But Marilyn thinks that these guys probably just wanted money from her. They were just coming out of an expensive store. At that moment, Marilyn asks if Nella knows if the powers of these earrings are disposable. After all, when the girl received them, she was told that they contain shield magic and healing. Nella replies that she can't determine such details. It's best to ask the girl's guardian. But Nella says the protagonist's guardian cares for her very much, and these earrings are really cool. Nella tells Marilyn to keep them safe. It's true that such tiny magical things, very rare and only very rich and noble girls have them. So Marilyn didn't tell Nella about it so she wouldn't suspect anything. The protagonist did not think that she was given such a valuable thing. Marilyn does not understand Ryer at all. After some time, the girl falls asleep, but suddenly the principal appears in front of her and starts to wake her up. Marilyn asks, "Is it morning already?" But the principal is happy that Marilyn is finally awake. He says that his name is Albert Carlos. The principal gets out of bed, and the principal laughs because Marilyn still isn't awake. The principal says someone's here to see the girl, and Marilyn has to go with him. They walk down the hall, and Marilyn thinks about the fact that as soon as she was told to go, she went right away, but she doesn't realize who this man is at all. The protagonist asks the man who he is. Albert Carlos smiles and says he's the director of this academy. At that moment, Marilyn remembers that he is indeed the director of the academy, the great sage. Marilyn was half asleep at the time and only now remembers. She says it's an unbelievable nightmare. The protagonist tries to apologize, but the principal says that they are already here. He opens the doors and tells Marilyn to come in because they have an important guest waiting for them. When the headmaster opens the door, Marilyn sees Ryer sitting there. She doesn't understand. What is His Majesty doing here? Ryer has never come to visit her before. Marilyn can't understand what's going on. Marilyn doesn't understand why His Majesty has come to visit her at the academy. The principal turns around and said that the old man should leave at this point, and the boy and girl should feel at home. Marilyn tries to grab the principal's hand and apologizes. She doesn't understand why Ryer is here and if he is angry with her because of the letter. When the principal has left, the girl bows to His Majesty and greets the light of the Empire. Their Imperial Majesty Ryer tells the girl to sit down. He asks what kind of person she is. After all, Marilyn asked him to sign the exit authorization since he was the only one who signed, and Marilyn still hasn't thanked him. The main character is upset because she forgot. Ryer asks, would Marilyn really ask for anything else after this? The protagonist apologizes. She says that the first time she went off the property and she didn't have not a moment's peace. Ryer asks, isn't the girl going to tell him about the attack? Marilyn thought it had nothing to do with the Yi ring, especially since thanks to the gray ones the Emperor gave her, that situation was resolved safely. Ryer gets angry and asks who she thinks he is. Marilyn replies that Ryer is the light of the Empire and the 32 Emperor of Betrayal. But the Emperor says that is the wrong answer, and he is the guardian of the girl. He should know everything who's too. Marilyn gets angry and starts yelling about how she didn't choose to own the ring and didn't ask the Emperor HH to become her guardian. He asks why Marilyn didn't use a shield right away, because a knife was suddenly presented to her neck and Marilyn was confused and forgot. Ryer asks why the girl didn't treat the wound immediately. He asks, can't she heal all the wounds here? Marilyn replies that it is a light wound, and if you use the medicine, it will heal on its own. Ryer tells her that there is an investigation into the attack, so Marilyn will have to stay away for a while. The protagonist asks how long it will last. Not until summer vacation. The Emperor asks if the girl has any reason why she must go out. Marilyn has already promised her friends to go out together, and there are still candy shops she hasn't been to. The Emperor asks, does the girl mean the Duke of Bolton's son? And Marilyn will get sweets every month, and that will end the girls' academy outings. Marilyn asks what she's in for, but she realizes that Ryer is Ryer, and no matter how she looks at him, there's no way Ryer is going to stand for anything that doesn't go the way he wants it to. After all, this guy is an unchangeable tyrant. Ryer says that since they're over it, he asks the girl to stop looking at the floor and sit close to him. Marilyn doesn't understand why she has to do that, but Ryer says that the girl can do it if she wants to. Marilyn sits down next to the Emperor, and Ryer tells Marilyn to sit even closer. He holds out his hand to the girl, and Marilyn doesn't understand. Is she going to be killed by the Emperor? At this point, the Emperor begins to use healing speaks of what fortunately seems to be an early shallow one. Marilyn is surprised at the guy healing her neck wound. She thanks him for it. The protagonist doesn't understand. This is the power of a tyrant who's won countless wars, and though Ryer is a tyrant, his power is real, even in his first life. The moment she was chosen to own the ring, she was overjoyed. Marilyn addresses His Majesty. But at that moment, Ryer stands up and bids the girl farewell. He dissolves into space, and Marilyn is upset that Ryer is gone. The protagonist is surprised at the Emperor returning to his place so quickly. Marilyn doesn't understand what it was because Ryer isn't like that at all. Did he come to this place to heal her wound? Marilyn doesn't understand what this guy's thinking. After a while, Marilyn falls on her bed and cries because of how tired she was from class today too. She never thought Ryer would come to school. And I guess Ryer's probably too busy tyrannizing the war. But if you think about it that way, since Marilyn had been reborn, she'd heard a little bit about Ryer's tyranny, and it was nothing horrible like the war. In the past, Marilyn had often heard of nobles beheaded at the behest of the government, but now she heard nothing about it. After all, until the main character died, it was Ryer who had nothing to do with the war. Marilyn doesn't understand what it all means. Suddenly, Julia runs up to the protagonist and says that the girl is called by the manager of the dormitory. The protagonist is very surprised at what is happening. After a while, Marilyn opens the door and apologizes for being late. She asks, "Is something wrong if she was called away?" But at that moment, the manager says that Miss Marilyn is calling for the principal of the academy. The superintendent will escort the girl to the principal's office, and so she must follow her. When the protagonist arrives at the principal's office, she apologizes and goes in. The principal greets with the girl, and Marilyn turns to Mr. Principal and asks, "Did something happen because the principal called her in so unexpectedly?" The principal says there was no time earlier, and he didn't get a chance to say hello properly. The principal once again says that he is Albert Carlos, the principal of this academy, and in truth, he would like Marilyn to join him in his research. The principal says that there is nothing to hide about the Antaeus girl's ring. After all, the link is heaven given to find the emperor's companion, and it is very romantic. Marilyn is surprised that the headmaster says so herself, as is the servant girl Ruda. The headmaster asks that the girl show him the ring, and that will be enough. The headmaster will greatly appreciate the girl's cooperation. Marilyn extends her hand and agrees to cooperate with the director. Albert Carlos is incredibly grateful to the girl. He examines this ring, and Marilyn asks the director if he has learned anything. The principal says that it is very interesting. He turns to Miss Marilyn and asks, "Are those earrings His Highness's earrings too?" Marilyn says that these are exactly yes. The director says that it's fascinating, and it looks like this ring and these earrings are connected. Marilyn apologizes because she's a little confused. The director says that the clue lies in the power of the black diamond, which has been passed down in the imperial family for generations, but he decides to stop there because blabbing is not a good idea either. He tries to escort the girl out of the office and says that he is satisfied with even understanding just that, at the black diamond, but the director says that it's about to be bedtime, and the girl should go to bed. At this moment, the doors close in front of the protagonist, and Marilyn does not understand. Is Sergei's ring really connected? She thinks about what it means. After some time, the protagonist receives a letter from the emperor. Ryer writes that while he read the letter to the girl, it seemed to him that she is very hard from the prohibition to go out, and the lack of clothes. It's a good excuse to go out shopping. Ryer says he'll send the girl both candy and dresses this time. Marilyn gets angry and says that even through the letter, the emperor is very nasty. After all, ever since Ryer forbade her to go out, she has been having a correspondence battle with him over her right to freedom. For no matter what good excuses she finds, Ryer won't budge, and he'd rather shower her with gifts to get her reasons to go out. Nella talks about how Marilyn now seems to wear a hairpin every day. She asks, "Does the girl really like her that much?" Marilyn says that she likes it very much because Halen secretly bought her that hairpin since she couldn't do it last time. Nella asks, "Did the hairpin come in the mail?" She doesn't understand how Marilyn can be sure that Halen did it. But Marilyn replies that it wasn't Nella who did it, but once. The three of them were out walking. No one else knows about the hairpin but Halen. Nella says that on that day, when Marilyn came, the sweets came too. Nella thinks it was the guardian, but Marilyn says it can't be. He doesn't even know about the hairpin, and the other day Halen said that it's cute and it suits her very well. And now the protagonist is sure it was Halen. Nella asks if Marilyn will go to the ball at the end of the semester in this dress that her guardian gave her. But this is the first time Marilyn hears that there will be a ball at the end of the semester. Nella tells her that the academy always holds an end-of-semester ball on the night of final exams. Marilyn is shocked that there will be finals. After all, her test scores are all terrible. And unless she's wrong, the exam results should reach Misha as soon as the exams are over. Marilyn turns around and leaves. She says she's going to go write a thank you letter for the guardian. She writes about how the noble lights of the Bertel Empire have lavished her with gifts, and she thanks them for sending her sweets and dresses. Marilyn says they are delightful, and she can feel the commitment to first-class materials. Marilyn is thinking of wearing the gifted dresses at the ball at the end of the semester. The girl would like His Majesty to show up in the outfit as well. Well, Marilyn decides that she should not bully the emperor with unnecessary words. After a while, the protagonist thinks that it's strange that Ryer's letter didn't come. She didn't even write anything that could make him angry. Suddenly, Halen approaches the protagonist and suggests that they go to the dining room together. Marilyn, of course, agrees. After a while, the protagonist and the guy are already sitting in the dining room. Halen asks, "Isn't Nella not going to be there today?" Marilyn says the girl won't be there, and that's why she's alone. Halen asks if the girl is okay. The guy turns to the main character and says, not to let Marilyn think it's because they haven't seen each other in a while, but there's something Halen wants to tell her. Halen says that Marilyn is different from the other guys, and he thinks Marilyn is adorable. So Halen wants Marilyn to be his date to the ball at the end of the semester. Of course, only if the girl is okay with it. But Halen asks that Marilyn just not tell her sister about it. At this point, Halen gets up from the table and says he's leaving. Marilyn doesn't understand. Is she really going to be Halen's date to the ball? A short time later, the principal was on the podium in front of many students. He turns to the dear students and asks how they are feeling about the end of the semester. Because summer break is coming up. At this point, Nella tells the protagonist that it is still surprising that Halen suddenly out of the blue called a girl to the ball as his date. Marilyn asks if the girl is relieved that Halen will be accompanying them both. Nella says it just does. She and her brother have always gone as a couple in the Empire, but Marilyn replies that the three of them will be more fun. The principal says that for the end of semester grades, the theme of the grades will be masquerade. Nella is very surprised that there will be a masquerade, because she hasn't heard anything about a masquerade, and if everyone's face is hidden, they won't be able to tell who's who. Nella says that Marilyn wanted so badly for her to be the flower of this ball. Marilyn replies that she shouldn't be the flower. Nella did. The girls are already getting ready for the ball. Marilyn sees that both her makeup and her mask are just perfect. Nella says it's because the items were donated by her guardian and it's very beautiful. Nella says that now it's time for the long-awaited ball. They've put their heart and soul into the preparations, and so they will be able to have a lot of fun. The main character, Halen and Nella, go to the ball. Marilyn sees that the ball is even more beautiful than she thought. Halen says that Marilyn looks very nice tonight. The girl thanks the guy and says that Halen looks beautiful too. The guy turns to the protagonist asking if Marilyn will give him one dance. The main character is already extending her hand to the guy, but at that moment, her hand is intercepted and pulled back. Marilyn sees that Ryer is standing in front of her. Halen starts screaming and doesn't understand what's going on, but Marilyn says it's okay she knows the guy. The main character says she needs to have a little talk with this guy, and she apologizes to Halen. Marilyn doesn't understand why Ryer is on this bola. At this point, the protagonist and the Emperor have retreated to a hidden location. Marilyn asks if she should address the guy as Your Majesty. Ryer says that's the way it should be. He asks, "Is Marilyn going to dance with the Duke of Bolton's son?" Marilyn asks why the Emperor came here before, now angry because Marilyn won't answer his question. The protagonist agrees and says she is going to dance with Halen. The Emperor squeezes the girl's hand hard, and Marilyn says that it hurts. Ryer apologizes, and Marilyn says it's no big deal. She asks what the Emperor needs. But at that moment, Ryer asks if Miss Marilyn will dance with him. Marilyn is surprised that she will dance with His Majesty. The protagonist doesn't understand what this means. After all, this is completely different from her first life, and Ryer himself asked her to dance. At that moment, the protagonist and the Emperor merge together in a dance. Marilyn turns to His Majesty and says that she wants to ask him something. She asks why the Emperor didn't answer her letter, but Ryer says that he didn't know what to write to the girl. At that moment, suddenly the prince bends the protagonist over and Marilyn is startled. Ryer asks, "Was the girl really waiting for an answer?" Marilyn says she wasn't expecting an answer, but it's just that the Emperor always answered her, and that's why she was worried. Ryer says he enjoyed texting the girl back. Marilyn replies that it's not that she enjoyed it, but it just showed her that she and the Emperor were good pen pals. The Emperor realizes that the girl considers him a pen pal. He asks if the girl liked the hairpin. Marilyn replies that it is her favorite, and she is very happy about this gift from her friend. Ryer realizes that the friend she refers to as the Duke of Bolton's son. He is angry about the fact that Marilyn got this gift from this guy. The Emperor starts yelling and saying that it was his gift to the girl, not Bolton's son. He pushes the girl away with all his might and hurts her. At this point, the Emperor himself is startled away. Marilyn says she is afraid of His Highness. All the people start looking around and don't realize what's going on. The emperor says that what he is afraid of the girl he knows very well. Marilyn says that when Ryer approaches her, she starts to feel an overwhelming fear. At that moment, the emperor extends his hand to the girl and asks if she wants to dance with him until the end, and the protagonist again approaches the emperor's house and Ryer apologizes. He says that he got angry and could not control himself. Marilyn is surprised that Ryer apologized sincerely. After all, she had never seen anything like that before. Now the protagonist realizes that the emperor gave her the jewelry because it was simply in a box of hairpins. There was no letter, and Marilyn mistakenly thought that Halen had sent it to her, and she only did it for that reason. The protagonist doesn't understand why Ryer is so sincere with her now, and why he's trying so hard not to let her go. It's never happened before. Marilyn doesn't understand what's going on. If the girl thinks hard, there were many suspicious moments. Ryer was very angry about the attack, and Marilyn thought that Ryer was angry because she didn't use the shield right away. But there must be another reason for the guy's anger. At this point, the main character stumbled while dancing and twisted her leg. Ryer says that if the girl hurt herself, they should go rest. Marilyn replies that she's fine and will be able to walk on her own. The emperor throws the girl's arm over his shoulder and says she better not force herself, if she's in a lot of pain. After a moment, he lifts the girl in his arms and carries her forward. They go outside, and the prince takes off his jacket and tells Marilyn to just sit down and rest, and he'll get something to drink. Marilyn doesn't understand. Is this really the emperor? After all, it sounds like a dream. She doesn't understand. Maybe the ring is just now starting to take effect. The emperor realizes that Marilyn is afraid of him, and that Marilyn's ring binds him to the girl. The ring is nothing short of a curse. All his life, the emperor has only seen that ring destroyed, and that's why Ryer doesn't want to see it happen again. He won't let Marilyn fall victim to the ring. Meanwhile, Marilyn is thinking, if after dancing with the emperor, the night wind will carry her away. She wonders if it's true that the ring only works now after rebirth. She doesn't understand why it didn't work in her first life. Because in that dark prison when she lost her maid, Marilyn was killed by poison. And even now, the memory gives her goosebumps. The protagonist doesn't understand why she suffered so much. At that moment, unexpectedly, the emperor approaches her and takes her by the shoulders. He asks what happened to the girl. He realizes that it's very cold in this place, and he calls for fire. Now the protagonist and the emperor sit and bask in the fire. Marilyn asks, "Is Ryer going to burn her to the ground now?" But the emperor says there is no way he will let the girl die, and he promises it. This fire is filled with the emperor's will, and there's no way he's going to hurt the girl. Marilyn doesn't have to worry. Marilyn doesn't understand if this fire is for her. She turns to His Majesty and speaks regarding this jewelry. She asks how Ryer knew she wanted this particular hairpin. Ryer tells her that these earrings have location tracking magic in addition to shield magic and healing magic. Marilyn doesn't understand. Does that mean the emperor knew where she was all along? She pounces on the emperor in surprise and asks what other magic there is. Ryer raises his hands and says there is no more magic. She asks if that is true. Ryer replies that it's true, and he added the tracking magic, just to keep the girl safe. Marilyn asks why she is in this situation then. After all, no one knows she owns the ring. It's many enemies, and so there is a high probability that Marilyn has become a target, since she's a strong candidate to be the ring's owner. And no matter how long Marilyn has been in the academy, the emperor has no confidence in anyone. Marilyn doesn't understand why she wasn't attacked in her previous life. Could it be because Ryer treated her coldly, and so there was no value in her even as a hostage? Marilyn says then she wants to ask one more question. She asks if Ryer thinks that both the ring and she are in his way. Marilyn says if a guy isn't interested in her. Then she doesn't understand when the guy gets her report card at the end of the semester. She asks that Ryer not open it and throw it away, and do that every time. Ryer asks that Marilyn say it again. She asks that Ryer not open the report card, but the emperor tells the girl to say it. Not that, but say his name. Marilyn doesn't understand. Did she forget and call him by his name and the emperor doesn't get angry? Marilyn thinks that Ryer is going to kill her.